Let me add you. Just don't. Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Want to welcome everybody that's on the program. What's up, Big Neil?
All of the people out there that did not want to see my face on camera, I have good news for you. This is probably what it's going to look like for the show. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but yeah, I'm going to be faceless here, but I am absolutely here in physical presence and spirit. We're going to power on, Lance.
You know what? Just so uh, it looks uniform, I'm going to go faceless as well. And
But
I'm going to go
we like
faceless as
looking at
well.
you.
And it's going to look like two eyes. It's going to look like
That's
Steeler
awesome.
eyes.
I think we can flip it. I think we have a choice between which there's a white background in here as well.
We're going to keep the two eyes up, man. It's hilarious. And with that, want to apologize for us not being in studio together. I was recently in Pittsburgh. I was looking for the payroll for Antonio Brown's football team. And unfortunately, I was not able to find the checks in the strip district. So, unfortunately, those gentlemen will not be getting paid. But when I was in the strip district, I did find a Robert Woolley's fish sandwich that was delicious. What about you, Neil? What's been going on with you in the world of Coulon?
You know, I didn't get that joke when you told me that the other day. I apologize. That's good. Antonio Brown just decides not to pay his team. Is there anything that's more crazily on brand than that? I mean, I can't get over how we should have seen this coming. We should have anticipated it. He doesn't pay anybody. It's
Yeah.
oh my god. Oh, that man. Not a whole lot. I hope you had a good fourth as well. I did not get back to Pittsburgh for that, but just spent some time chilling around home. Work stuff's picking up pretty good for me. I'm looking forward to it. I love this time of the year. The new season coming on. A lot of good stuff ahead. And Lance, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is like our 2-year anniversary, isn't it? Didn't we start this 2 years
It's
ago, right around now?
it's I think it's close to now. Yeah, I mean, I'll take a look back. I think I've deleted some of those old vids, but probably I think it's been 2 years. So happy 2 year anniversary to you, sir.
You as well as the brainchild behind the New Standard podcast. I know that it's been a hell of a ride from where we started. I've been in 3 different locations in that time. That's more what tipped me off. Looking back on the YouTube page, check out our old episodes. For anybody out there that's interested in seeing how right and wrong we were in the past, you can see all of that on our YouTube page. But looking at the backgrounds, it's like, oh yeah, God, I remember when I lived there. That's weird.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. But with that, as always, you can check out the program on YouTube and you can look us up with the New Standard wherever you find your podcast. And the title of this show is simply Can Kenny Pickett Lead the Steelers to the Promised Land? Now, one thing we're going to try to do is we're going to try to hold ourselves to 30 minutes as well. That's probably going to be the big change coming up in year 3, I guess it is. And so I think to answer that question, I, I think it has a lot of layers. I think you can peel back very different layers. And the one thing I think we wanted to do is take a look at what are year 2 comps for Kenny Pickett. What are the year 2 comps? Who could you compare him to? Comps are a popular thing used in real estate. And what are the year 2 comps for Kenny? Now, why don't you hop into yours before I jump into mine, Neil?
Here's the thing. I wanted to approach this from a more statistical manner. And in doing that, if we break this down at a very simple, rudimentary level, Kenny Pickett in his rookie season made 12 starts. He completed 63% of his passes, threw for 2,404 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Of the 18 quarterbacks that have been drafted, including Pickett, since 2018, if we were to rank all 18 of them, to be honest with you, Pickett's easily in the bottom 3 for rookie year. Now, we know that there are a bunch of reasons for that. We're not here to get into that. The key here is the difference between year 1 and year 2. Comparatively speaking, right now, I would say Pickett is most of that group. He fits best in certain parts of Baker Mayfield, Tua, I'm not going to try, and Justin Fields. Be honest with you, that's not the greatest ringing endorsement right now. I will point out, though, the one who made the biggest leap from year 1 to year 2 was probably, by my opinion, Trevor Lawrence. And Trevor Lawrence's rookie season looks, game to game, kind of like Pickett's. Not too far off of that. Lawrence went off. He had a great second year, new coaching regime. That, to me, Lance, is probably the biggest takeaway of all of this. We can compare them how we'd like statistically. And I broke it down differently than you did. We can compare all of that. The one thing that I would say is most true is none of the people on that list had a coach like Mike Tomlin, with the exception of Mac Jones, who regressed quite a bit from year 1 to year 2. So is that the real comparison? Mac Jones, from where he was drafted, Jones, his rookie season was a lot better than his second year. He made 17 starts, 67.6% of his passes completed, 3,801 yards, 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He dropped in all of those areas his second year. So I'd say the downside is a year like Mac Jones, whereas the second year upside would be like Trevor Lawrence. 17 starts, 66.3% of his passes, 4,113 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 8 picks. I think if we were to compare the two, if we're going to say a combination of Baker, Fields, and Mac Jones for the low end in year 2 and a high end of Trevor Lawrence, I feel, all things considered, it's probably closer to Lawrence, because the 3 that I mentioned on the downside all had coaching changes. The Steelers haven't.
That's a great point.
Lawrence had a coaching change for the considerably better. So I think, if we are going to use the sales comparison approach of real estate appraisal, which is what I did with this, I'll explain some other time. I think his closer comp is to Lawrence. Now, physically speaking, nowhere near. But Lawrence's second year fit closer overall, I think, to the change in situation that Pittsburgh is going to see this year. That's a big endorsement for the improvement I expect to see out of Pittsburgh's offense. So with that, I don't think it's going to be Lawrence, but 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions over 17 games, is that a stretch? I don't think that's a whole lot to expect out of an offense that's not going to be great, but they're going to be a lot better than they were. And Kenny gets a full offseason as the starter, a full training camp as the starter, better weapons around him, certainly a better offensive line, and hopefully an offensive scheme that makes a bit more sense than the one they had for the first half of last season.
Now, it's interesting that you came up with Trevor Lawrence as a name. And I was thinking of Trevor Lawrence because where we're similar is I thought Mac Jones and Justin Fields. And the reason I did not pick Trevor Lawrence is just because of the physical differences. And your physical ceiling and your ceiling as a player will tie into the results that you have on the field. There are some things that Trevor Lawrence can obviously do physically that Kenny Pickett could never do. So that's why I left. But I like how you left him in. But the reason I left him out was because I didn't know if it was fair to necessarily compare a year 2 comp with a guy that was the number 1 overall pick and widely considered the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. So I left him out. And you gave me this number, so I added Russell Wilson in as a comp with Kenny Pickett, although Russell wasn't Russell's what, a third round draft pick?
Third round pick.
And so although Russ wasn't um, a first round draft pick, he does have big hands though. As opposed to Kenny having little hands. He has big hands though. So I think my comp was to Wilson, Jones, and Fields. And the interesting thing, and looking at the comps was, and you mentioned it very astutely, was the regression between Mac Jones. He threw 8 less touchdown passes, and Justin Fields threw an additional 10 touchdown passes. I think the interesting thing when you do these comps is there's a lot of factors that go into how they're going to play. So I took some numbers that you originally gave me. So my comps were Wilson, Jones, Fields, and Fields. And the one thing you see is when you look at Russell Wilson and his comps, and you look at Russell Wilson's first 2 years, they are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, Russell Wilson's, his numbers were great in the first 2 years, had a great supporting cast. But I mean, you're talking about a guy that was top 10 in DVOA both years, top 10 in DYAR, and top 10 in quarterback rating in both years. And, I think, I like to use those stats because it's going to be interesting to see if Kenny can make that jump. Because here, and let me give you the 3 scenarios because you gave me your numbers a while back in terms of what a year 2 comp would look like for Kenny Pickett. That was 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 3,500 yards passing, 8 yards per attempt. My pops was very similar to you. He said 25 touchdown passes, 7 INTs. He said 3,700 and 7.5 yards per attempt. I was more bullish than both of you. I said 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 4,000 yards, and 8.1 yards per attempt.
That's a monster year. Just to put it out, that's a monster year.
I told you I was being bullish now.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm absolutely being bullish now. If that's the case, in terms of touchdown passes, you're at plus 18. My pops is at plus 18, and I'm at plus 20. I mean, is that realistic? Are we wearing some black and gold glasses, especially me, with a plus 20 in touchdown passes in year 2?
I don't think so. I mean, statistically, it looks like a massive leap. And just to point this out, of the guys that I mentioned, the second-year quarterbacks, the ones who threw for 27 or more touchdown passes in year 2, Lamar Jackson, who was an MVP that season. Kyler Murray had 26, but the main couple I'm focusing on, Joe Burrow, top overall pick. Justin Herbert might be probably top 2 of the best who are on here. And Trevor Lawrence last season, top overall pick, great prospect. You're looking at, Lawrence only had 25 last year. So Lawrence hasn't even done that. At the same time, I don't know if we want to split hairs over touchdown passes. I don't know if that's going. How about this? Let me put it this way. You said 8.1 per attempt, right?
Yes.
If he's throwing 8.1, I don't care how many touchdown passes he has. That offense is moving the ball and they're scoring points. They're going to run a lot. They loaded up for the run this season. I don't know how many opportunities he's going to have for touchdown passes. The Bengals, on the other hand, they give Burrow basically a green light inside the 5. Whatever he wants to do, they do. He's going to throw a lot of touchdown passes. Does that mean he's a better quarterback overall? I mean, well, let me rephrase that. I don't want to compare the two. I'm just saying he's going to have the opportunity to throw 38 touchdown passes. Lamar Jackson, his second year, his MVP year, he owned the goal line. He had a run pass option every single time they were inside the 10. he's going to throw a lot of touchdown passes. Lamar, though, and this is what's interesting, if we want to get into comparisons, Lamar had a big yards per attempt. He was around 8 his second year, his MVP year. He hit the deep stuff and he scored inside the goal line, or inside the red zone. So for Pickett to reach those types of numbers, opportunity has to exist for him. Now, is this a team that we can expect the quarterback to be taking carries, to be running options inside the 5? I would hope not. I think they're going to hand the ball off a lot. I think they're going to run a lot. 27 would be great, but I'm going to bet if he hits 27, he's going to be around 7.5 to 8, which is a monster number for any quarterback, let alone Pickett in year 2. They will have hit on a lot of deep plays, a lot of deep touchdowns for him to do that, because I think their red zone strategy is going to be largely ground focused.
It's interesting that you say that, because I'm looking at some of these numbers as well. And when I wrote down the 27, I thought, just, man, a plus 20 would be, it's just awesome. And when I wrote down 27, 13, 4,000, 8.1, even as I wrote it down, I was like, well, man, if he hits those, he's the 7-year, 8-year quarterback guy for the Steelers, unless he gets injured. I would think that would be a phenomenal and a fantastic year. And it just kind of, when I looked at those numbers, I kind of looked at Wilson and just how good Wilson was his first 2 years. But the interesting thing that you said in your comments is that the guys that made this big jump are guys that were drafted much higher, are guys that are much physically better. And so looking at Kenny, that's why I'm having trouble as I look at my 27 number, even a 25 number, and we are splitting hairs there. I mean, that's a significant jump. I mean, that's 18 touchdowns.
Yeah, either one of those is a
either
great
way.
Number.
And those touchdowns have to go to somebody before we take a big deviation or a detour. I just want to ask, I was thinking to myself when I wrote down a 27, who benefits the most from this jump to 25 or to 27? And my thoughts were Freiermuth.
Yep.
I was thinking Freiermuth would be the guy that would benefit the most in the red zone. Just as an outlet, a guy that he feels more comfortable making throws to. And of course, I think Deontay Johnson, will score a touchdown. But if he's going to throw 25 to 27 touchdown passes, I'm thinking at least 10 of those go to Freiermuth.
Yeah, just really quick to piggyback off that point, Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson. Now, you've heard me rant about this a bunch. Deontay Johnson's 2022 season is so statistically weird. There's no way it's going to be repeated. He's going to get in the end zone a lot more often. And also, if you look back historically, a Steelers team over the years, it's been a while since they've had this few passing touchdowns. Now, it's been a while since they've had, to be fair, the first half of Kenny Pickett's tenure, along with Mitch Trubisky under center. So you can see where a lot of that comes from. And I'm not blaming Deontay Johnson, but I'm not letting him off the hook either. There are plays to be made. Everybody left plays on the field last year. I think Johnson's going to see the end zone more, because there's no way a player gets the ball that often and doesn't score. It hasn't happened at all, not even close to happening in NFL history. They're going to score more points with what they have. Some of that is going to be the result of touchdown passes. And the guy that's getting the ball the most is going to be Johnson. I think this is a Pro Bowl type of year for Freiermuth, though, depending on how people want to vote. But he's going to be among the best 3-down tight ends in the game. I'm not saying he's Kelsey. I'm not saying he's Kittle. He's going to be a solid 60-catch, 800-yard guy and probably get a few red zone looks, 6-7 touchdowns. That's a great year. That year didn't happen. They haven't had that from a tight end group since Heath Miller, really. So there's a lot of upside to what Pickett has to work with. And also to dovetail off what you said about the other quarterbacks, the superstars, the guys that were taken in the top 6-7 picks, they also got a ton more opportunity. Keep in mind, Pickett only started 12 games. Burrow only started 10. He was really good, but he got hurt. He only started 10 his rookie year, but he had the keys the entire time. Pickett hasn't had that advantage.
I think that's a big point, and I think we both know is you're going to have to convince Mike Tomlin that you're not going to turn the football over.
Yep,
If
exactly right. You're exactly right.
If Tomlin thinks you're going to turn the football over, he's putting you in a straitjacket. He'll play games like they did in the last 3, where he'll try to keep the game close and win it and minimize the game, although heighten the pressure on you, but reduce the game to a drive or two. It was so evident in the Raider and Ravens game that he was slow playing the game. He was really trying to reduce the game down to a couple of drives. If we can piece together 7-8 good plays on a drive, maybe 14 over a couple of drives, we can win this game if we play solid defense, run the ball, don't turn it over. Here's the interesting thing I want to ask as we really try to keep the show to 30 minutes. Again, you're checking out the new standard, and we're talking about this question of Kenny Pickett and his maturation in game 2. It's not game 2, year 2, and if he can make this jump and what it may look like. I took a look at playoff quarterbacks. That's Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, Purdy, Jones, Prescott, Allen, Smith, Cousins, Tua, Lamar, Brady, Lawrence, and Herbert. They threw an average, and it was a low for the NFL last year. They threw an average of 26 touchdown passes, which would have ranked 10th overall in the league. They threw an average of 26 touchdown passes and 10 interceptions. So our comps aren't way off when we say 25 and 27. If he hit those marks that we're talking about, 25, 27, low double digits in interceptions, that would put him into the same type of statistical comparison to playoff quarterbacks. And the average for playoff quarterbacks is down because Purdy only threw 13.
Yeah, it really messed everything up.
Purdy only threw 13, and Lamar got hurt and he threw 17. So it might be a little bit higher, closer to 27, 28. But if he hit those benchmarks, I think he would be close to the production of a playoff quarterback. Now, let me ask you this, and I'm sure it's going to be a loaded question, but it's a great question before we end the program is, let's say I'm going to look at the comps again, or give me your comps. And if he hits your comps, I have you at 25 and 10. I think you changed them just a little, but I'm going to go with the 25, 10, 3,500, 8 yards per attempt. If he hits those comps, are the Steelers a playoff team?
Oh, yeah. I think they win 11, maybe 12 games.
And let me ask you this also. If he hits those comps, what are they averaging in terms of points per game?
That's a good question. I would need to break that down probably a little bit more. My guess, 25 a game, 25 and change, somewhere in there. This is what we should do. Take a look and see if we want to say 2.5 to 1 touchdown to interception, and see if there is a correlation between that general range and above and playoff appearances over however long. My gut is yes, because what it means is you're being relatively productive throwing the ball. You're not turning the ball over. And especially if you put him at 3,500 yards, he's playing. That's a key component to all this as well. Pickett, we're assuming Pickett plays 17 games, or at least 16. You mentioned Lamar. That's kind of what triggered in my mind. The Ravens had horrendous passing numbers last year, largely because they didn't have their quarterback the entire time. And the quarterback they did have was terrible. There are teams that can get into the playoffs with that, but you need a lot of other stuff to do it. I don't think the Steelers will be in that position. That said, Pickett is not going to throw 650 times this season. If he hits 500, I think that's more indicative of him playing 17 games rather than a very aerial based offense. They're going to throw stuff short. They're going to do a lot of quick game. It's not going to be up to him to be completing 15, 20 yards down the field consistently. They'll do that. It's not going to happen especially often because they're going to want to control the clock, maintain possession above anything else, and lean on their highly paid defense to win games.
It's going to be interesting to me because if I saw those numbers, factoring in Tomlin as well, if he hit my numbers of the 27 touchdown passes, which isn't much different, if he hit those marks, somehow I think it still doesn't translate to 25 touchdowns. I mean, it's 25 points per game. Somehow I still think the way Tomlin may manage the game in certain situations, that it would be 23 a game. And if they jump to 23 a game, that would be a 5-point jump if I'm right.
God,
Uh,
they jumped to 23 again.
if they jump to 23, a 5-point jump is a monster jump.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Going from 18 to 25 is a touchdown jump. Like
Yeah.
that's a monster jump.
Touchdown a game.
Touchdown a game. That's a monster jump. I mean, that's 17 times 7. I mean, that's a monster jump. Just to round it off, just to keep a round number, that's another 140 points. I mean, that's
You look at it like this. If you want to improve, 4 to me is the number, because 4 means last year you settled for a field goal. This year you scored a touchdown on a drive.
yeah.
1 drive a game, 4 points higher. They don't have to come back the way they did at the end of last season if they did that one more time in each of those games. That's a marked improvement. I think 25 because I feel like they have potential in this offense to come out of nowhere and drop 38 on somebody and kind of jack the numbers up a bit. I want to put it at that level, perhaps because I'm being overly optimistic. You're calming me down. I'm thinking maybe 24 is a realistic number. Either way, though, while I will admit that there is a difference between 24 and 25 over the course of a season, there's still an order of magnitude of improvement that's going to come out of this offense. And that's not just because the talent that they have is improved. It's because they were god awful for half the season last year.
Yes.
We can't stress that enough. And we certainly did during the show last year. They were legitimately the worst offensive Steelers team we have seen in a very long time. They were awful. And they fixed that. To me, I think it's good. Everybody hates Matt Canada. I get it. I'm not harping for an extension for the guy myself, but things improved quite a bit. They still didn't have the talent last year that they will this year. And with that, Pickett will have the ability to succeed with what's around him. He's not going to have to go and do everything himself. But I do think they'll hit on a few more big plays. And with that, they'll string a few of them together in a game and just, blow the doors off somebody and generally play more conservative. So 23 to 27 touchdown passes, I think, is a reasonable range. And I think 24 high end, 25 points a game, which is a good number. That would be a great season. This would be an 11-12 win team if they could hit that.
Yeah, if they could hit that, if they could get to that 25 number, then they're cooking with gas. But we're going to stop it there, and we're going to jump back into this and do a part 2, and jump more into some of these numbers. I want to jump into that number you talked about, that 2.5 to 1, and see what that does. And I'm going to look at it in terms of the playoff quarterbacks. Just looking at it, most of them were at least 2.5 to 1. There were some guys that stood out that were not. And that was Dak Prescott was one of those guys that was not. Lamar was a guy that was not. Well, no, Lamar was, because he only threw 7 interceptions. Brock Purdy was a guy that was as well. So I want to look through that as well. I think most of those guys and those playoff guys were 2.5 to 1. It's going to be very interesting to see, how this offense looks and what it translates to. So we're going to dig into this topic again next week. And that's why I call this part 1. Can Kenny lead the Steelers to the promised land, part one. We're going to take a look at part two, because I think it's going to hinge largely on the performance of Kenny Pickett in this offense, particularly given that he's playing in a division with three outstanding quarterbacks. But with that, we're going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.